Good evening, I'm Melissa Ridgen. Thanks for joining us. The Indigenous population in Canada continues to grow and has now reached 1.8 million people. This is according to the 2021 census. And for the first time, the First Nations population has topped 1 million people. APTN's Fraser Needham has more.
The Indigenous population in Canada grew by 9.7% between 2016 and 2021, according to Statistics Canada. This outstrips the non-Indigenous population, which grew by 5.3%. However, this number is lower than 2016 growth, which was almost 19%. Christopher Penny is with Stats Canada.
We see differences when it comes to Inuit, Métis, and First Nations, and we see differences at the regional level as well. So we see Métis growth has slowed, and we see First Nations with registry status has slowed. Again, all still higher than the non-Indigenous population.
He says the lower growth rate may be due to a number of factors.
But we also see other growth from response mobility, and this is people that are answering the census differently in one year than they do in the past. And this can be due to a number of factors. There have been a number of court decisions or legislative changes that have changed the requirements or the eligibility for the Indian Act or for other agreements. There are the signatures of modern treaties or other modern agreements.
Indigenous Services Canada Minister Patty Hajdu says she also doesn't know why the growth rate slowed, but she says the government sees an overall growing Indigenous population as a tremendous opportunity.
That means that Indigenous people have amongst the youngest population that they are serving in their own communities. It means that there's an opportunity to invest in young people so they reach their full potential. It means that we have a growing population within Canada that is actually the envy of the G7.
The Stats Canada numbers also show a rapidly rising Indigenous population in urban centres. This includes a major growth of Inuit population living outside Inuit Nunavut at almost 24%. Hajdu says this shows the importance of the government working with partners like Indigenous Friendship Centres to provide services.
That are looking at things like how to access higher education, how to manage the bureaucracy of living in an urban setting, how to fill out important forms for the federal government, like tax forms that allow them to collect Canada Child benefits.
APTN reached out to the Assembly of First Nations and Inuit Taprit Kanatami for comment, but did not hear back by airtime. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Well, a Mi'kmaq family is outraged and looking for answers nearly 2 years after their mother died at the Cape Breton Regional Hospital. Here's Angel Moore with part one of a two-part exclusive story that examines the woman's death.
I thought she had the care that she needed, and we left her that evening. So I was really in shock.
That's how Lynn Francis felt when her mother, Bridget Ann Denny, unexpectedly died. She spoke the Mi'kmaq language and was a mother of 5 and had 15 grandchildren. The active member of the Eskazoni First Nation unexpectedly died on January 20th, 2021 at the Cape Breton Regional Hospital. Denny was admitted the night before for pain and complications due to diabetes. Mary I. Jo Francis, Denny's daughter-in-law, says she died the next morning. The doctor on shift said an autopsy wasn't necessary.
She advised that an autopsy wasn't really needed because she had so many health issues, but really we didn't know how she died.
Her body was cremated, and days before the funeral, the family found out from another patient that Denny had fallen in the middle of the night.
And that we learned that she had fell the night before. That was not brought up when we had the conversation with the doctor and the nurses. We were there for hours after she had passed away. The whole family was there.
Jo Francis obtained Denny's medical chart, filed a complaint with the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Nova Scotia.
But if we had known she had fallen, that all this stuff was wrong with her the night before, we would have wanted an autopsy. The medical examiner wasn't even made aware of her death because it was just kind of like brushed off.
Jo Francis met with hospital staff for answers with no success.
I would say it was heated, actually. It was a lot of back and forth, but a lot of anger and frustration from us. We wanted answers, and we didn't get any. We left there even more angry than we were that day because they had nothing. They had nothing.
The incident sparked an investigation under the Protection for Persons in Care Act. The report concluded the facility failed to provide adequate care based on lack of documentation in response to the patient's unwitnessed fall, including failing to document the affected patient's post-fall vitals and post-fall assessments firsthand. Staff inaccurately completed the affected patient's admission fall risk assessment and hourly checks. No documented evidence that post-fall neurovitals and a SIMS report were completed. And it is beyond the scope of this investigation to determine if this contributed to the patient's death. Associate Professor Lynette Reed, Bioethics at Dalhousie University, cannot comment directly on Denny's case, says inadequate care is unethical.
But when unsafe care is being delivered, then a line is being crossed.
According to the report, even the staff were shocked by her death, saying, all staff reported they were surprised and shocked by the death of the affected patient. One staff reported the death was unexpected. And that means certain protocols had to be followed, but the hospital would not provide their policy when asked. And the medical examiner should have been notified, but the hospital didn't.
I was disgusted with the report. Can't believe that they're actually treating patients like that. Especially your native. They brush you off.
The report says Denny's fall risk assessment was inaccurate, as evidenced by the incorrect scoring for 2 identified risks, that is, IV and history of falls. It did not include the date, time, and signature of the person who completed the assessment. This inaccurate assessment resulted in the affected patient being identified as low risk for falls, and therefore the additional high risk for falls interventions were not considered. But was Denny's death the result of discrimination? Her family is looking for answers, and I'll bring you more of this story in part 2 on APTN National News.
We'll show you that part 2 of that story later in the show. Well, this past week, millions of people around the world paused for the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II, a ceremony that was steeped in rich tradition and also solemn remembrance. Westminster Abbey is the same church where the Queen was married in 1947 and then crowned in 1952. Her family was all in attendance, along with nearly 100 presidents and heads of government. In his sermon, the Archbishop of Canterbury praised the Queen's lifelong dedication to service to both the country and the Crown.
We can all share the Queen's hope, which in life and death inspired her servant leadership. Service in life, hope in death. All who follow the Queen's example and inspiration of trust and faith in God can with her say, we will meet again.
Some Canadians, meanwhile, paid their respects at a funeral in the nation's capital. Politicians past and present and a former Governor General, and as well as a number of prominent artists and musicians. They were all there, as was our Fraser Needham.
The Queen is dead. In the land of the red maple leaf.
It was a day of respect, reflection, and looking forward, as Canadians paid tribute to Queen Elizabeth, who passed away earlier this month after 70 years of service. Algonquin Poet Laureate Albert Dumont of Kitigan, Zibi, and Anishinabeg spoke about the monarch's ability to relate to everyday people.
The Queen, her gentleness, her ability to emotionally connect with the common people, her desire to make the world cleaner and safer are truths she carries with her now into the great land of souls.
And her role in ongoing reconciliation.
The horrors committed against Indigenous peoples of British colonized lands, by past monarchs will be spoken about around the council fire of the Spirit Land. The Queen will at that time renounce the brutality of the past.
Former Governor-General Adrienne Clarkson noted Queen Elizabeth's important role in establishing Canada's modern Constitution and Charter of Rights.
In 1982, Queen Elizabeth II came and signed the patriation of our Constitution, for which Canadians had worked for decades. We gained our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Canadians will always remember the Queen for coming to sign over to us what is rightfully ours.
Well, former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney talked about the Queen and Crown's role in creating and maintaining a stable Canadian democracy.
The success of Canada, so deeply admired everywhere, as a model of civility, fairness, equality, and achievement. This didn't happen by accident. The system of government chosen by our founders had much to do with it. The British parliamentary system, led incomparably by the monarchy.
And renowned Cree playwright Thompson Highway said thank you in his own way.
Second part of that story of a Mi'kmaq family wanting accountability and answers for their loved one's death in hospital. Stay with us. Welcome back. Before the break, we heard from a Mi'kmaq family that is outraged at the unexpected death of their loved one at the Cape Breton Regional Hospital. That's in Nova Scotia. They've been looking for answers ever since. Here's Angel Moore with the second part of that exclusive look into the death.
Mary-eyed Joe Francis was shocked when a provincial investigation into Bridget Ann Denny's death found the hospital failed to provide adequate care. Joe Francis wonders if Denny was discriminated against.
You know, and I question myself all the time. What if there was a non-native person in there? Would they have, would they have answered the buzzer? Would they have ran? You question this stuff because we're First Nation people. We live with racism every day. And it's in the back of your mind. You just wonder, what if?
Reed says,
but when people already have a history of receiving racist care from the healthcare system, when they already have a history of receiving inadequate care, then that inadequate care is more harmful for them.
Daji Jayamuk, a Mi'kmaq health organization, works with the Nova Scotia government to improve health care. Executive Director Lindsay Peach says,
is working with the provincial health systems around the complaints process so that there is a true picture and understanding of the extent of racism, what that looks like in the health system, how that impacts people's care experience, how it impacts the quality and safety of the care that they receive.
Joe Francis says Denny was afraid of the hospital.
It makes me sad as a Mi'kmaq woman for our elders, for my parents, the fear to go to a place that is supposed to care for you, that blows my mind. No elder should ever be scared to go to a hospital.
The report says around 2 a.m., another patient was ringing their call bell while standing in the doorway, attempting to get the attention of the staff, saying someone is on the floor here and someone needs help in here. Staff arrived and helped Denny back into bed. The report says the person implicated documented second-hand information as patient slid to the floor. However, the fall was consistently reported as being unwitnessed. Therefore, investigators were unable to determine how the fall occurred and the length of time the affected patient was on the floor. The report says there is no documentation Denny was assessed after she fell, or staff followed the hospital's fall and injury prevention policy, which includes a head-to-toe assessment, monitoring for injuries, especially for unwitnessed fall, for 48 hours after fall. Monitoring involves vital and neurovital sign assessments every 2 hours at a minimum, and documentation of details of the fall in the patient health record chart. According to the report, the nursing flow sheet indicated that Denny was in bed and did not get up to use the washroom between 7 p.m. and 6 a.m. Reed says paperwork matters.
One thing didn't happen here, and then 20 things couldn't happen afterwards. But that just shows you the importance of that one thing. Paperwork is never just paperwork in a healthcare system.
The next morning, Denny was unresponsive and could not be revived. The report says, had the physician known about the fall, the file would have been reported to the medical examiner, and the family would have chosen to proceed with an autopsy.
No one had ever said she fell. No one had ever said she had a rough night. No one ever said her blood pressure was low. Nothing. There was nothing other than she was a very sick woman. That's all we were told.
Joe Francis says the family wants to hire a lawyer, but cannot find one.
Just for the sake of you're taking accountability, we're guilty, we're sorry that this happened to you, and we're going to do better so this doesn't happen to anybody else. But we can't even get that.
Reed says the lack of lawyers available to families is for a reason.
They have most of the competent health lawyers in the country on retainer. So that is a known barrier to access for accountability for patients, because there are not that many lawyers who have competence in health law and who are available to patients to pursue lawsuits.
The report included 5 directives for the hospital, including training staff on documentation policies, fall and injury prevention policies, sign of abuse, duty to report abuse, and reporting procedures to the PPCA. The Nova Scotia Department of Seniors and Long-Term Care said in an email statement to APTN News, the department will continue to actively monitor the situation until the directives are fully addressed. Joe Francis says that is not enough.
They couldn't even let her die with dignity, and that's the most heartbreaking part about it, because this system is our healthcare system. They failed. They failed not only our mother-in-law, my mother-in-law, their mother, our grandmother.
The Denny family is considering their legal options. Nova Scotia Health declined an interview request. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Eskasoni First Nation.
We need to take one more commercial break, but then an apology 50 years in the making for the treatment of Sachin Littlefeathers at the Oscars. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Academy Awards said sorry to Sachin Littlefeather this past weekend, almost 50 years after she refused the Best Actor award on behalf of Marlon Brando. In 1973, Littlefeather made a short but powerful speech at the awards show wearing a buckskin dress and moccasins. She was the first Indigenous woman to stand on stage at the Academy Awards, representing Marlon Brando after he was named winner of the Best Actor award for The Godfather. She explained he could not accept the award because of the treatment of American Indians in the film industry. Littlefeather claims she was mocked and discriminated against for her speech. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences had formally apologized in June, but then held an event just this past Saturday in person.
In recognition of the misrepresentation and mistreatment of Native American people by the film industry, you made a powerful statement that continues to remind us of the necessity of respect and the importance of human dignity. The abuse you endured because of this statement was unwarranted and unjustified. The emotional burden you've lived through and the cost to your own career in our industry, irreparable. For too long, the courage you showed has been unacknowledged. For this, we offer both our deepest apologies and our sincere admiration.
I am here accepting this apology, not only for me alone, but as the acknowledgement, knowing that it was not only for me, but for all of our nations that also need to hear and deserve this apology tonight.
The National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation partnered with the Royal Canadian Mint to create a keepsake aimed at educating Canadians about the truth of residential schools. This commemoration represents Inuit, Métis and First Nations survivors. It was unveiled this week. Tamara Pimentel has more.
On the front are the words "Every child matters," handprints and footprints resembling the children who never made it home. On the back, the resiliency of Métis, Inuit and First Nations people impacted by the residential school system.
We never thought we'd see what we're seeing in our lifetimes. Most of us never thought we'd live this long. But we're here, and we're here to share the truth with you.
Eugene Arcand is one of many survivors involved in creating the keepsake from the Royal Canadian Mint and the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation. Honoring survivors and educating the rest of Canadians. The artwork is a collaboration between Cree, Inuit and Métis artists. Resembling the Métis, J.D. Hawk created a sash and bison with floral beadwork.
Because it is said that when a bison faces a storm, they'll walk into the storm to get to the other side quicker. So this way, it symbolizes that the bison's facing east, where colonialism came from. So now we're just coming out of that storm for the survivors.
Jason Sikwak from Labrador designed an Ulu and Inuk survivors.
I left them faceless so that any Inuk who looks at the medallion would possibly think about and remember their relatives who went and survived or went and didn't come home.
The teepees and a Tikanagan were added by Leticia Spence.
For me, when I was creating it, it was sort of like, what would we have looked like had there not been a residential school? What kind of love would we have experienced?
Net proceeds of every keepsake goes toward the Namiquinamag Community Support Fund.
These 215 I'm forever grateful for, because for years we'd been sharing our stories and nobody believed us. And the 215 validated that we were telling the truth.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
That is a wrap on your APTN News weekend. We're always so thankful that you can join us. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Have a great night.